Alrighty, cherubs. So today we're going to be talking about the Inca. We're going to continue in the Americas, and we're going to talk about the Inca down in South America. You'll notice the spelling with the K. In academia, that's going to be considered a little more correct because that's more in line with the Quechua language spoken by the Inca themselves. So even though the term referring to the nation as the Inca is incorrect because they did not refer to themselves that way. The Inca was the ruler. It's kind of like calling the Egyptians, the ancient Egyptians, the pharaohs collectively, because that's what the title of the ruler was. So there it is. Okay. Now, remember that the themes that we're looking at in America are power and propaganda. How do they demonstrate the use of their ability to project power? How do they project propaganda through their art? How do they reflect their love of nature in art? How do they reflect a reverence for nature in art? Is there any duality that we're going to see? Do things have multiple layers of meaning? And what influence do they take from previous societies? Okay. So the Incan Empire was the largest empire in the Americas at the time ever, actually. And at the time of the conquest, when the Spanish arrived, they're going to actually see this as just shocking that it was so huge and as advanced as it was in this really, really, really tough terrain. Okay, so the Andes Mountains here that run along the spine of South America, they're big mountains. It's the second after the Himalayas. These are the tallest mountains in the world. So yeah, this is tough land here, and they're not going to have wheels. They do have wheel, but they're not going to employ it in a cart type fashion. That rather they're going to have this vast road network that connects the different parts of the empire that people run. Okay, they're only a big animal that they're going to domesticate is the alpaca, the llama. All right, and llamas are generally not super. A llama's not a camel or a horse. Let's put it that way. Okay, so they're not going to be pulling these massive carts. All right. The Incan Empire, they called it Tawantinsuyu. Tawantinsuyu. There we go. And it means the four divisions, the four parts, the world in four parts, essentially. The four divisions of the empire are going to be reflected. We're going to see it pop up a couple times here in the art, it's kind of important. Okay, so that's how they saw the world, their world, and they're going to create microcosms of that world in the capital. Okay. The Incan Empire rose very, very quickly and fell very, very quickly. It started with a small tribe in Peru and then exploded out in all directions to take essentially the entire western edge, or much of the western edge of South America. All right. For a brief overview of the Inca, go ahead and give the TED Ed a watch, link in the description below. Okay, so our pieces today are Machu Picchu. Hopefully you've heard of that. Hopefully this is one of those things that you walked into this class knowing something about it, if nothing else, just the name. The capital city of Cuzco. Okay, a tunic, and an example of Incan gold metalwork. So we're going to stay here in Peru today. What is today Peru? And our first piece that AP wants us to see is the capital city. Okay, so this is the city of Cuzco. Now it's just this basic floor plan that they've given us here. And what we're seeing is the main parts of the city. The city is going to actually extend out a little bit on either side, but this is the main part of it. And you'll notice that the city also isn't flat because we're sitting in the middle of the Andes Mountains. It isn't going to be just this flat city. It's this long city, and that reflects the terrain that it's on. So it does have different levels Okay, and different people are going to inhabit different parts of the city depending on their social status. So the higher up places are going to be for the higher up people, and the lower down places, the lower elevation places, are going to be down for the lower class people. The city is also going to be divided into four sections, just like the empire, and they do that very purposefully. They divide up the city to reflect the makeup of the empire. So the city, the capital city, becomes a microcosm of the empire. Okay. Now, the shape of the city is important itself, and they're going to see within it the shape of, excuse me, whew, they're going to see within, reflected in the shape of the capital, the big cat, the mountain lion, the puma. Okay. Hopefully you can see it a little bit here. So we're going to have the shape of the city reflects the sacred cat, the sacred big animal, the big carnivore there. So you can see, hopefully, that we've got our head, the body, the tail, and the two legs that are of the cat that are crouched under sphinx style. Okay. Now, again, you can see that the city does extend out, but initially, its original design was this very long and narrow section. Okay, the big cat section. So, again, the head, the body, the tail, and the two legs. Okay. Now, again, the city is going to be divided into four parts. The upper part up here is going to be a fortress. Okay, this is Saqsa Waman. We're going to take a look at Saqsa Waman later. So this is going to be a fortress up here. Again, the higher lands for the nobility, the lower lands for the lesser important peoples, and the beating heart is the central plaza. Okay, of the cat, this central plaza here. Okay, it's important to note that Cuzco is not the same as Cusco, but obviously Disney took the name for the character after the city. Okay, so things to know about Cusco. They're going to employ an ashlar masonry, which means that they're going to pile big stones on top of each other and hammer them into shape using stones to hammer these big boulders into shape, so that they're so close, they fit so tightly together that you can't slip a piece of paper in between them. Okay. They're not going to use mortar, and that's what ashlar masonry is that they're not going to use any type of mortar. They don't need to, and it's actually beneficial that they don't. Peru sits on the edge of the Ring of Fire out in the Pacific, and so they're prone to earthquakes. And when you have earthquakes, the stones are going to jostle. Because they don't have mortar, they're just literally laid on top of each other, but they're big enough that they're not going to fall down. Okay, we'll see that when we look at Saqsa Waman. That when the earthquake hits, that they just kind of jostle around a little bit and shake, and they're fine. Okay, they're not going to fall over. So again, they know what they're doing here. And Cusco, again, serves as the capital of the empire. We got that head, which I just told you was the fortress. The heart is the central square. Again, it's divided upper and lower, and then again into four parts so that it reflects the makeup of the empire itself. All right. So the city of Cusco is the empire in miniature and microcosm. The Inca are going to have girls. They're going to have conquered peoples bring their children to Cusco for education. Girls are going to learn how to be good women, and they're going to learn how to weave. They're going to learn how to brew corn beer. It's called chicha. They're alcoholic drink made from fermented corn. They're going to learn how to serve the gods. Young men are going to learn the ways of the empire. So it's cultural imperialism that's happening here. So they bring these kids in, and then they send them back out to their homelands. They teach them in the capital for many years while they grow up, and they teach them how they want things run. Okay, send them back home so that the kids who are now adults are fully believing in the ways of the empire. Okay, so that is something that's happening here in with the Inca. Now, part of the city of Cusco that AP wants us to see is the Qorinkancha. The Qorinkancha is going to be a ceremonial center. It's a temple dedicated to the sun. And it's also going to reflect the belief again, it's going to recreate the empire even more in miniature. Okay. And what they're going to be doing on the inside of the Qorinkancha, inside this temple complex, is they're going to recreate the lands and the goods and the people and the animals of the empire in gold and silver. The Inca were master craftsmen, and they were extremely rich in gold and silver. And so they're going to use these materials to create this miniature of the empire with this garden that reflects like all the crops that are grown there and the animals that are raised there and the people. And so it's this wonderful little, again, microcosm of the empire. Because it is a temple, the Spanish are not going to let it stand. Okay. So what they're going to do is they're going to tear down what they can and in its place build their own sacred site. So again, how we can see what other cultures have done, to impress upon like, haha, our God's better than your God. The Spanish are going to do that here in Cusco at the Qorinkancha. So really what's left of the Qorinkancha is some of the ashlar masonry, the foundations down here at the bottom. And then up at the top, the Spanish are going to build the convent of Santo Domingo. Okay, so this up top here is not the Qorinkancha. This is the convent of Santo Domingo. The Qorinkancha is just going to be what's left of it, the foundations that the Spanish couldn't tear apart because it was too big, right? So go ahead and give this a watch. It's going to show you inside the convent, but you can see here again part of this wall of the convent. This is what's left of the Qorinkancha. Okay, so you'll see inside the convent then, and how it's the kind of the stones. They build them up, and then they stop, and then the Spanish built on top of it. It's really interesting to see that mixture of cultures there, as well as some of the use of the gold that they're going to find. They're going to melt it down. Most of the gold that was in the Qorinkancha is going to get melted down and repurposed by the Spanish. Okay, there's very little Incan gold that remains. Okay, so let's see, the Qorinkancha again, ashlar masonry. It is a sacred shrine to the Incas, dedicated to the worship of the sun. Okay, they are going to be sun worshippers. Then they're going to see reflected, just like in Chavin, how the color of gold reflects the color of the sun. The Inca are going to believe that too. Okay, the gold becomes a manifestation of solar power. The Qorinkancha does mean the golden house. All right, and the Inca are going to claim descent from the sun. Okay. Now, this is some of the walls of the fortress of Saqsa Waman. Okay, up the head of the puma, and you can see some of the ashlar masonry. Now, again, you can see how big some of these stones are. They're all massive. Okay, even the small ones are quite substantial. We're talking dozens to hundreds of tons, these stones. So you can see what I'm talking about, how they take the stones, they fit them together as best they can, and then they pound them to make them fit perfectly. All right. And then, so they're completely earthquake proof, completely Spanish proof. And yeah. So the head of the puma is Saqsa Waman, and it was a fortress, and it was used for defense against the Spanish when they showed up. Okay. Part of it was left incomplete. Now, here's the thing. Here's the thing that you need to know, is that it is debated whether or not these are actually even from the Inca or if the Inca just found them. The ashlar masonry is typical Incan, but there is some debate scholarly if from a previous culture or if they're from the Inca themselves. Okay. Now, thing to know about Incan gold is that again that they produced a ton of it for the Spanish. Okay, the Spanish came, they kidnapped the last emperor Atahualpa. They ransomed him. They had a room. These, so many dimensions. They laid out the dimensions of a room and said, "Fill this with gold if you want the king back," and then fill a smaller room twice with silver. And they did. And then they killed the emperor. Okay. Um, yeah. It's important to know that, yeah. So when we look at this, 13,000 pounds of gold and twice that of silver. Okay. That the Spanish are going to take this gold and essentially melt it all down. So again, like I said, they were master craftsmen with metalwork, but there is very little that remains. Okay, one of the pieces that does remain actually does come to us from the Qorinkancha, and it's the Maize Cob. Okay, and you take a look at this, and it is so corn. The word corn in English is used to denote the most prevalent grain crop of an area. So corn in England, in the colonial era, is not the same thing as this. They would have referred to corn as wheat or barley or oats, depending on where you were. In America, they called this corn. When the English speakers got here, they called this corn because that was the most prevalent grain crop. Okay, it's maize because corn is a generic term, so it's maize. We call it corn because we're inheritors of that English tradition. But what they're going to use is gold and silver to create, and this is again part of that garden from the Qorinkancha. It's using a technique called repoussé. Repoussé is where you're going to take a metal and thin metal and shape it around a mold, shape it around a form, okay, so that and hammer it into it so it takes on the shape of that form. So they would have molded it in clay or plaster and then taken the metal and formed it around it. Okay, so if you want a better view of what repoussé looks like, go ahead and watch this video again to see what repoussé looks like. He's going to be taking it actually into a thing of wax, into a thing of hard wax and hammering it, okay? Hammering his design into it that way. The most famous example that you're aware of, that you didn't even know that you were aware of repoussé, is the Statue of Liberty. Okay, that's how they made her. She's just thin copper. Like your car door. She's thin. Okay. But they sculpted her first in plaster, in sections, and then hammered the copper around her, and then took her in pieces and assembled her. Okay. So that's repoussé. And so the Maize Cob here again reflects that expertise in metalwork that the Inca are going to have. That they're going to be able to use these advanced techniques. They're going to create alloys in metals. They're going to show the cob itself, the kernels here, you can see how they're kind of tarnishing and they look almost bluish. That's because the Inca had blue corn, and you can like it's like a blue purple, and you can buy, you know, purple corn chips. It's made from purple corn. Okay, this blue corn, and so they're again aware of that fact, and you knowing what's that silver is going to tarnish to be this kind of bluishy purple, and they're going to use that to create this. Is really again quite remarkable. So the maize cob again from that Qorinkancha garden. All right. Now this piece is called the all tokapu tunic. All is the English word all. Okay. Tokapu. Now you take a look at this, so you can see it's like a poncho. Okay. What this is, it is a alpaca wool and cotton. Cotton is a New World plant. Okay. They before the Spanish arrived, Europeans didn't have cotton. It's crazy to think about, but it's a New World plant. So they're going to intermix the fibers of the wool of llamas and cotton to create this. As you can see, here's the slit for the head. Head pokes through here, arms come out the side, and it's worn down the front. And what it's decorated with are these geometric patterns. Now, in South America, back up. In Mesoamerica, the Mexica, the Maya, they're going to use a lot of imagery that is, they're going to draw out humans, although it's going to be stylized. In the Andes, they're really going to focus a lot on geometric patterns. Okay, so really, really completely non-objective art or extremely geometrically stylized art. They're not going to be drawing pictures of humans per se, more this type of patterning. Okay, now what these little squares are, each is they're called tokapus. Okay, so each one is its own individual tokapu. Okay, and each one represents a clan, a family. All right, so the all tokapu tunic has emblems from all the clans, from all the major houses. So who would wear this would be the king. Okay, the all tokapu tunic is worn by the king, and essentially he's wearing the empire. He's wearing the empire. So each clan would have, you would wear a tunic with their own tokapu comprising the entire thing, but the king gets to wear all of them because he is the entire empire manifest in one. Does that make sense? So he's the microcosm of the empire, living in the microcosm of the empire, worshiping at the microcosm. These concentric circles that keep getting smaller and smaller until the focus is all on the Inca himself wearing the Altokapu tunic, which is really kind of cool. Okay, not to be confused with Togepi, a stupid Pokemon. No, not the same thing. Okay. Important to know that the Altokapu tunic, that textiles are going to be super important. For weaving is going to be a high art for the Inca. Okay, that they're going to use these fibers to create all kinds of everything, clothes. They're also going to use these fibers. They're going to weave bridges. Okay, across the Andes Mountains. That their textile work is going to be so good that they're going to make bridges out of this wool and cotton hybrid. Okay. It's crazy. These were, again, masters of their craft. All right. So we've got, let's see if I'm missing anything. Appears to be good. Okay. Now, our last piece is the piece that you walked into this class knowing, or knowing, at least heard of, is Machu Picchu. Okay. Machu Picchu is going to be built by Pachacudi, like the not the first Inca, but the Inca who founds the empire. Okay. He's the ruler that starts to push out beyond the boundaries of Cusco and create the empire. So he's the founder of the empire. He's going to build the city of Machu Picchu. It is not the capital. It is too far up in the mountains, and it was only discovered by Westerners, by Europeans in the late 19th, early 20th century. Okay, I believe it was the early 20th century when it was found by Westerners. Locals knew it was there. They just weren't saying anything. That this place was the lost city, quite literally. It's set on this mountaintop. They've reclaimed land and formed it into terraces so they could farm. Our best guess as to what Machu Picchu is a retreat, a vacation town for the emperor. It's going to house a staff. People are going to live there until they don't, until they leave, and it gets forgotten, essentially. It's set into the mountains. Okay. Here's some other views of the city. We're going to use that ashlar masonry again. Okay, go ahead and give the clips a watch. Machu Picchu is going to have palaces, baths, running water. It's going to have temples. It's going to have farming. Again, built by Pachacudi, the Inca ruler who founds the empire. So again, not used for any administrative purposes because it's too far away. But most likely it's going to be a retreat, kind of a la Park City or Moab, where people go to like get away from it all. Part of Machu Picchu is that they're going to have this observatory, which opens up onto the equinox. Okay. In June, it aligns with the equinox, the rising sun. It has windows set for constellations. So they have this advanced knowledge of the heavens. Down below, there's going to be a cave structure. So they're going to think that is possibly a link down to Inca mythology. All right. So it becomes representative of the heavens and the underworld, again, kind of an axis mundi type of thing. Now, this is called the Intihuatana stone, and it reflects, and it's set up high here in the hills, and it's going to reflect it's going to represent the big mountain, like the mountain, this guy. Okay. The Intihuatana stone is going to be over here, and it's going to be meant to mimic this hill right here, this mountain peak. Okay. It's called Intihuatana stone, means the hitching post to the sun. Okay, it's where the sun gets tied to the earth. And what it is again, on the equinoxes, it casts at noon, it casts no shadow. Okay, so it's the place again where the sun and the mountains come together, axis mundi type thing. Okay. So again, the Inca are extremely advanced as far as their stonework, their astronomical observations, administratively, again, and everything becomes symbolic of something else. The stones here are important for all Peruvian cultures, all Andean cultures. Stone worship is important. So we were getting the Intihuatana stone. We're getting the formation of these stones because stone rock is going to be very important to their cultures, as well as the sun. Combine the two, you get Intihuatana. Okay. And these are our pieces for the Inca. Make sure you watch those videos. They're going to give you a lot more information, and go back in your notes, highlight, underline, annotate as you see fit. Okay. That's the Inca. And next time we'll do North America post colonial contact. And that's it. Have a great day.